This is Professional Launch with Ricot Aladin, positively connecting the less connected, bridging gaps, and building futures in the community. Professional Launch with Ricot Aladin.
Hello, professionals. My name is Ricot Aladin, and I'm the founder of Professional Launch and the host of the Professional Launch Show, WDOY. And my guest today is Aaron Hill, and he is just the man I want to talk to because of what he has been able to do in the community. So, Aaron, please briefly introduce yourself for the Professional Launch audience.
I think you nailed it. I'm just a man. I think that's accurate. But yeah, my name is Aaron Hill. So probably most people are more familiar with me as one of the co-founders of Fargo Brewing Company. So three other gentlemen and myself co-founded that back in 2010. I did that full time for about 9.5 years. Then I got my real estate license. So now I do commercial real estate. I hang my license with Goldmark Commercial in the community. And I got elected to the Fargo Park Board. It would have been 2.5 years ago. And I'm currently serving in the role of president on the Fargo Park Board. Also on the YMCA board, help the United Way with their campaign, helping Great Plains Food Bank with the capital campaign right now as well. And then I have three young kids. My boys are 12 and 9, and my daughter's 7. So I help coach all the sports and activities and try to find time to spend time with my wife. And,
oh my goodness, your hands are full, Aaron.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I like to say it's always weird. I tell people, I'm like, I like to work. I enjoy being productive. I like having a lot of different things going on. It's energizing, and so I like to stay active.
Wonderful. So, I know that the first time we talked, you mentioned that you were from Minot and eventually made your way to Fargo. So, how did your early years shape your perspective on community? You just mentioned that you were involved in many boards and stuff like that. So, how did your early years shape your perspective on community and leadership?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think growing up in Northwest Minot, we had a kind of a neighborhood vibe where we had an alley and I spent a lot of my time kind of riding, but it's kind of that typical childhood of it's like, be home when it's dark. And I think, the church was close, the school was close. We'd walk everywhere, play with our friends. And I think sort of it was kind of ingrained from a young age, especially that I think it's more of that small town mentality as well of like, we have our neighbors and we take care of our neighbors and, watching my parents sort of, shoveling, snow blowing, neighbors, sidewalks. I think you just see a lot of that sort of the North Dakota nice mentality too of we help each other out. And then we moved to Fargo before I started junior high, ended up going to the Catholic school system as well. So I know there was a lot of ingrained service activities and things like that. I joined the Key Club, and there were sort of different activities we did. I know our senior year, we kind of had to do a more in-depth project, and I went over to Rosewood on Broadway. Back then, Shanley, the old Shanley was on the north side, and I would go to Rosewood, I think it was every week, and had a kind of a senior friend that I would go visit with. And then I continued my education at St. John's University. It's a Benedictine monastery, founded it. And the rule of St. Benedict is very hospitality, generosity, selflessness. You should never have to open a door because someone else should be opening a door for you.
I like that.
If you're on the bus, they would teach us. I talk about my time at St. John's really, really molded a lot of my value system in addition to my parents and family and friends, and sort of the values ingrained in. There's a bus that runs back and forth between the men's and women's campus. And if the bus is full and a lady gets on the bus, you get up and you offer your seat to the lady and you stand.
That's really funny.
And so I think there's a lot of those values that I was just on campus this week too. I think that really helped shape who I am as well.
Wonderful. So, this show is about helping young professionals who are launching their careers, find a career path, make a better career decision. And this is why we talk to folks like you who are doing, a wonderful job in the community by being involved. And so, on a side note, I was just Tuesday. I attended the Possibility Showcase, where I get to hear about some amazing I'm talking about amazing project that the NDSU students are working on. And my goodness, when I think of that, and most of them were not business students. They were not, in entrepreneurship or anything like that. And they were coming up with very, very great ideas on how to solve problems. And I think, having the show, they deserve a little bit at least some attention for thinking about this, for taking the initiative and talk about that. So, you mentioned, and from your bio, I know that you studied political science. So, what drew you to study political science and later pursue a master's in strategic leadership?
So I always tell people what I probably should have done is been a high school social studies teacher and a coach, and then coach sports. Okay. And I got to the end of I knew I always liked social studies. I took American history, a big fan of history, sociology. I never took psychology. But that was the area that I was sort of drawn to. And at the end of your first year, you have to declare a major. And I sort of thought, well, I could do history or when I was thinking about education, I was like, well, but if I'm going to be a teacher, probably don't need St. John's as much. I could come back here, go to NDSU or MSUM or something, maybe, a little more affordable. But I was like, I really love St. John's. I want to stay here. And so I took an intro to political science class, and I hate to say, I sort of thought, yeah, all right, this is pretty cool. It's like close enough. I get government, civics, I get, sort of history. I was actually one class away from a minor in history. And so those were always the classes I was drawn towards. And even after college, I got more interested. I would spend a lot of time going to Barnes and Noble. I couldn't afford to buy books, but I would go into the self-help section in Barnes and Noble. And those were a lot more like psychology sort of based books on like do what you are, what color's your parachute. There's a book called Callings, so it was a lot of, I started sort of getting more interested in, I didn't study psychology in college, but got more interested in that after college. And then was someone approached me and asked if I'd consider teaching an entrepreneurship class at one of the local universities. And I said, I suppose I need a master's degree for that. So I was kind of looking at different programs. I was actually looking at college counseling at one point. So getting a master's in counseling, working on a college campus, helping students kind of help figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And I ended up, the University of Mary had a master's of strategic leadership program that just seemed to sort of fit a little better. And at that time, the concept of the brewery had already begun. So I thought, okay, well, this actually should also help with the business, which it did actually. There was quite a few classes I took that really helped, as we were building our own business.
Oh, wonderful. I am glad you touched on that, because this is going to be the next part of the conversation, talking about your experience at Fargo Brewing. But we're going to take a short break here. But right before we do that, I want to remind everybody that, Professional Lunch is a nonprofit organization that rely on friends, on guests to really and partners to keep our operation going. So reach out to us and be a friend to help us keep our mission going. So we are back. We are in the studio today with Aaron Hill. He's a commercial real estate, and we are going to talk about a part of his journey that I truly admire because of how much that he has shared with me, that he learned from that journey, from that experience. So you co-founded Fargo Brewing, a Fargo Brewing Company, and spent 14 years building it. Is that right?
Yeah, we the idea was hatched in 2009, and then we officially became a company in 2010, and then we just closed our doors at the end of 2024.
Okay, so
14-year journey.
Yeah. So what was
15.
that journey like from the ground up?
Oh man, I don't think we have enough time to
to
go through all of it. I keep talking about I'm working on I want to start journaling more because I do think someday I'd love to write a book about the experience.
Yeah.
It was such a wild ride. We were young. For me personally, I'd studied political science. I thought my plan was to go to law school, but I was going to take a year off, and ended up bartending at a resort in the Brainerd, Minnesota area. And so people always ask, how did that happen? When did you get into brewing? I'm like, well, I never actually really brewed. I liked the hospitality and the bartending side of it. And then there were my friend Jared Hardy. His wife went to dental school in Portland, And he went out there as well, got his MBA. In one of his classes, he had to create a business plan, like just a kind of a mock business plan. And he chose like, I'm going to write a business plan to start a brewery in Fargo. And so when they moved back after they were both done with school, that's what we were actually at a Red Hawks game in 2009. And I was like, hey buddy, good to have you back. Jared and I went to high school together. And I said, what are you going to do for work? And he said, I don't know yet, but I have a business plan to start a brewery. And I was like, that actually sounds kind of cool. Like, I think, like, at that game that night, we just kind of kept like, oh, all right. He says he asked me to join him. I think I just kind of like invited myself along. But we ended up meeting two brothers. Neither of us knew how to brew beer, of course, a pretty important part of starting a brewery. But we ended up meeting two brothers, and the older one, Chris, studied biology at Concordia, ended up out in Montana, and then got a master's degree in fisheries as a fish biologist out in Idaho. And then at the time we met, he was living out in Stevenson, I believe, Washington, kind of near Portland, working as a fish biologist, but kind of working at a brew pub in the evenings. So we ended up sort of meeting on the phone at the end of 2009, and we said, all right, you and the younger brother know how to brew beer. Jared had more of the finance background. I always called myself the politician. I was the salesperson. I had the community connections, and I'll go shake hands and kiss babies. And so we set off on that journey. And it's interesting when you're, 27 and none of us had any money, no experience, we didn't have any parents who were sort of guiding us. And we just, we jumped off the cliff and sort of had a little bit of ignorance that, hey, well, we can do this. And ignorance and confidence, let's put it that way. And I think if we'd known how difficult it was going to be, we probably wouldn't have done it. But at the time, there were no breweries in the entire state of North Dakota. Okay. So there were some back in the mid-'90s, downtown Fargo. But back then when we started, there weren't any. There were like a dozen in Minnesota, a dozen in Montana, none in North Dakota. And so our kind of mission was sort of like, let's bring craft beer to the region, to Fargo, to North Dakota. And we kind of built it from there. So there was a long winding journey of how we ended up in our building with the equipment and it was a lot of ups and a lot of downs.
Yeah. So, the reason why I wanted to hear a little bit more about this story is because, when you are young, sometimes it's best to take action. Either way, you're going to learn something from that experience. And so now that you transition from doing that to being a commercial real estate, what made you transition from the brewing to real estate, and also what exactly did you learn from the previous business, from Fargo Brewing? I'm talking about skills.
Oh, sure.
That help make that transition easy for you.
Yeah. Well, the big thing was the network I had built, over the years, and even prior to my time at Fargo Brewing Company, I worked at United Way on the development side, the fundraising side. Was very involved in the Young Professionals Network through the chamber. So I'd already had a good network, but the brewery helped sort of speed that up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Man, I learned so much. Like I learned how to manage people. I'd never done that before. I'd never had anybody report to me or us or lead a business. I was thinking about it on the way over. I was so worried about making everybody happy all the time. And, there were so many lessons I learned on leadership, and you can't, if your goal is to make everybody happy, you're going to fail miserably. Yep. So learning how to make difficult decisions that not everybody's going to be happy with, learning how to, when things aren't going well, tell people they don't have jobs anymore. You have this weight, and people don't understand the weight that goes on your shoulders when you have that level of responsibility. Everybody just assumes like, oh, you're your own boss, you own your own business. First of all, you're a millionaire, you've got all the time, you can do whatever you want. And it's like, well, no, it's actually a ton of risk, and it's leverage and debt. And we're hoping it's a gamble. We're betting that this will work and turn into something. I learned how to negotiate. I learned, I did a lot of our contract work, and you kind of in the beginning was like, oh, everybody's, we can kind of just do handshakes and everybody's going to be great and wonderful. And even if you do have a signed contract, I learned there's groups that they didn't really care. They're like, it's like, well, the contract says this, and they're like, whatever. And so there's so many things I think I learned. I don't know if I want to say I became more skeptical, but I guess I learned that, I think I went in so wide, starry-eyed and like, hey, this is going to be great and wonderful. And all these experiences, you get beat down over time. I learned a lot about politics in North Dakota, how legislation works, how it really works, and how kind of the back end of that operates, and sort of how powerful groups can be in the state, and there's so many things I won't talk about on air right now.
I understand. There are I have probably I have 4 different follow-up questions that I want to ask, but for the purpose of time, because of time right now, we probably won't get to them. But I'm curious though, when you were transitioning to real estate. What makes that transition? What is it about your skills that you have previously that says, besides you have a lot of connection?
Sure.
And say, okay, maybe I'm gonna go with real estate. Why not a different? Why not?
Yeah. Why did I pick commercial real estate?
Exactly.
Yeah. I sort of narrowed it down to, like, if I left the brewery, would I stay in the beer business or would I do something different? And I started looking at, you look at a community and some of the experiences we had at the brewery with real estate. You look at some of the people, to be honest with you, some of the wealthiest people in the community, like, what do they have in common? They all have real estate. Real estate is a good, economic engine. It's passive income. So that was sort of what led me to start thinking about it. And then I just started meeting with other agents who did it. Andy Westby, our broker at Goldmark, he's been a friend of mine for a long time. So actually back in 2018, when my wife told me it was time to look for other jobs, she's like, we've given the brewery thing,
enough time.
Now it's time for you to go do something else. I actually met with Andy and started asking him questions. He was, I think he was at Goldmark. He wasn't the broker at the time. He had been there about a year and a half, and he came from the tech industry. So I was like, hey, what was it like? Tell me what it's like. And he kind of told me, okay, you're 1099 and the details. It's about $5,000 to get your license, the classes, coursework, the registration fees. And they say, it's 1099, you're pure commission. And I was like, oh boy, you eat what you kill. And you don't get paid unless you go transact deals. So at that time I was like, I just don't think that. But he's like, you'd be great at it. It's network and responsiveness and communication. And I think the other thing I knew, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to go report to someone and have like a boss, because after running a business, I think that's not going to work well for whoever I report to. And I think we're both going to be frustrated, because I'm going to be like, why aren't we doing this? We should do this. I trust myself. That's another thing I learned at the brewery too, is like, I kind of figured or learned, I'm like, I can kind of do whatever I put my mind to. And so if this is what I choose to do, then I trust myself and I believe in myself. And so I liked with the 1099 comes the freedom and the flexibility. And yes, I have a broker who I go to for advice. Like yesterday, I'm like, hey, what do you think I should do? Or what have you done? But he's not telling me, hey, you need to do this. You need to call that person. It's all up to me. And I like that. I like the freedom and the flexibility. And also what I really, really love, probably my favorite part, is you're so connected to what's going on in the community. It's like, what's going on there? Who owns that? What are they building there? And I love that you're, I love being a part of that process. And especially having been on the brewery side as like a tenant and operator of a business, I love working with other like businesses when they're like trying to find a space, or they need to sell their space or lease their space. It's, I feel like I have been there. And so now I get to help. I get to take what I learned and help them. And then I get to go home at the end of the day and go coach my kids' baseball team,
Wonderful.
I'm not on the road.
Man, it is, when you describe the kind of relationship that you have with your broker, where you don't feel obligated to do what he's not telling you to do things, but you still have your own freedom to do what you want. It's almost as if you're describing a mentoring relationship.
That's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's 100% what it is. Is like, because when you're new, and I've told him multiple times, like, Andy is so wonderful. I love Andy. And I said, when I switched over to do commercial real estate, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel stupid all over again. I went from being an expert in something to now I'm brand new. I really don't know much. Exactly. And so I need some hand holding. I need some guidance.
Exactly. And as you're describing this is what we are trying to create with Professional Launch, with the organization, with the with the mentoring platform that we are creating. We're going to take a short break here, but we're going to talk about this a little bit more because we need, professionals like Aaron here to help bring those ideas, because sometimes you might be in a mentoring relationship and not even understand that is a mentoring relationship. And that's one of the things that I find out. Many people have mentors, but it's never been labeled a mentoring
it's not
relationship.
Defined. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not defined like that. So we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we'll talk to Aaron about his contribution to many boards, many other organizations in town, and why it is important for young professionals. We'll be right back. And we were just talking about the power of mentorship. And one funny thing about that is sometimes you don't even realize that you are in a mentoring relationship. And so this is what we are trying to create with Professional Launch, with our mentoring platform, because we believe we can expect a 17-year-old to know what they want to do out of the gate. We can expect even a 24-year-old to know what they want to do.
Sometimes a 40-year-old.
Sometimes a 40-year-old, right? And so our goal is to really to talk to folks who have been there before, those professionals who have seen some success thanks to their connections with mentors, that those relationships that they probably didn't label them as mentoring relationships, but as they are talking about it, you realize that was a mentoring relationship. So on talking about mentorship, so how has mentorship, either giving or receiving, shaped your leadership style?
Well, as we're talking about on the break, I mean, I right out of sort of college, I felt like I didn't have a lot of, kind of guidance immediately. And what I started doing is sort of just reaching out to people, or you'd meet someone and it's amazing. Like I have people do it to me all the time. I like a student will send me a LinkedIn message and be like, hey, I'm interested in commercial real estate, or I'm interested in starting my own business. And I'm, can we grab a cup of coffee? And I think I every single time I'm like, absolutely, of course. Mm-hmm. Like I'll give you an hour and a half of my time. Ask me questions. I'll give you some feedback, because I had people along the way that were helping me as well. And I was in my mid-20s and was working at United Way and was ready to sort of step away from there. And I remember I went into Mike Solberg's office at Bell Bank and kind of said, hey, I'm ready to leave. And I'm like, I could banking ? And he said, you should start your own business. I went, well, I've got a friend with a business plan. He's like, there you go. And there's other examples of people like that, that I would sort of reach out to. And it's amazing how you do have to ask, though. You've got to take that. We were talking, you do have to take some action, and, and you have to reach out and you have to ask. And I think especially younger people would be really surprised at, especially in this community, how many people will say yes.
Yeah. And I can second that. I can second that, know? So
and I do it because I'm like, I had people, and I still do. I still have people. Now it's changed and their roles have changed, but there's still people I would say I look up to and say, wow, how did you get where you are? And help me understand the steps you took. Mm-hmm. And then it can validate what I'm doing as well, because when you're in the middle of what you're doing or what I'm doing, you kind of question like all the things I'm doing. I'm like, what? What am I doing to myself? Or is this, is it worth it? Is it sustainable? And when you can, if I can meet with some of these other people, it sort of validates like, no, I think it sounds like you've got the right purpose. You've got the right concept in mind. Your goals seem like they're aligned with your values. And so it sounds like you're doing the right thing. Yeah. And then you can kind of go, oh, okay, good.
Yeah, exactly. You take a breather,
I'm not just like on a treadmill, just exhausting myself. Because a lot of times, when you do the work I'm doing, you don't always see the product at the end of the day. It's not like, hey, look, I built this thing, or I put that table together, or I packaged this product. It's hard to see the fruits of the labor and be like, is it even doing anything? Does it even matter? or am I just grabbing coffee every day, all day long? You know,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
stay-
So again, talking about this, man, I realize in the last few years that I am a product of mentors. And if you know me, if you see me around wherever, I can tell you that without the investment, when I say investment, that means people who are successful, who take the time to talk to me for 30 minutes. I don't know if I would be able to sit here talking to you. And when just now you mentioned, one thing I try so hard to do is telling the young people, the students, the college students, don't ever be afraid to ask.
yes.
It doesn't matter whether you are seeing a CEO or it's someone mid-level leadership. Don't be afraid to ask, because I'm telling you, and people always say the worst answer you can get is a no, but more often than not, especially around here, those folks are waiting for someone to ask.
They're ready and willing. And people
willing.
in people in a position like that, they like, I look at myself and like the things I have learned, like I want to share the things I have
There
learned.
you go.
And
This is where your legacy come in,
yeah,
right?
I always tell people, I'm like, learn, and especially like in the work I do on the commercial real estate side now, I have certain clients that I'm like, please don't make the mistakes I made. You know, like
exactly.
this is what I learned. It's your choice. You do whatever you want, but I'm saying this is what I learned, and please, if I were you, I wouldn't do that, or don't extend yourself like this, or don't put yourself so far out there. And I think it's absolutely critical too. And I think it's like you said, it's like you have to take that step, take that action. People are really happy to share their experiences and help. And I think another thing to keep in mind is like, people don't get where they are all by themselves.
No,
they don't. Nobody
one.
does. I'm sorry,
No
but nobody gets where they are in whatever position they are all by themselves. They've had help along the way. They have had other people who have said yes to meeting with them or having coffee with them. And so more often than not, especially if they're in high level leadership positions, they're more than happy to share that experience or to,
Yes, exactly.
help.
So, Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot here, because you are one of the mentors that we really want to have on our platform. Where we are with the development of the platform right now, if you go under professionallaunch.org, you can sign up as a mentor. I know it's not a flashy platform, but the bare bone of the platform is it's ready for us to begin accepting mentors. So please, and if you can give 1 hour a month, even
I think I did sign up already, didn't I? I'll have to double check, but I for sure will.
Yeah, that would be cool.
We were saying too, I did sign up. NDSU has a mentorship program as well. I know that you're familiar
exactly.
with.
So I'm not asking for much, because I know how busy and how your time is very, very, very important, and you're busy. So, but when I'm talking to mentors, I say, if you can, make yourself available for 1 hour a month. Let's say maybe you can say we go 2 hours for the month, half hour a week. I can do that.
Absolutely.
And I think that there are students that would jump on that opportunity.
I'll double check before I leave, and if I haven't signed up, I'll sign up.
I apologize for
promise.
putting you on the spot there, but but you are actively involved in causes like YMCA, Fargo Theater, United Way, and more. Why is community volunteering so important to you?
It's I've realized about myself in the journey, the transition journey, about I am happiest or most fulfilled when I'm serving other people. I think that's what sort of, I ended up, nonprofit fundraising. I think that's part of the brewery, the hospitality side of the brewery, serving, taking care of people, being a good host. So I realized, I'm like, okay, so if I am happiest and most fulfilled when I'm serving other people, then how can I do that? And I feel like that was a big, to answer that question as well on commercial real estate, is like, how can I monetize it in a way? How can I get paid to serve people? Okay. Other than bringing them beer or food, or coffee. And so I think that sort of helped me move into that real estate side. And so I'm like, how do I, like, if I'm happy when I'm serving others, then the more I do it, the happier I am. It sounds weird. It sounds interesting. And I'm sure some people probably would say it's BS if they're like, whatever. I'm like, but that's what I've learned about myself. And so, and I'm the type of person that I just like, I have to work on kind of saying no to things, or because like I just feel like what's going on and how can I help? You know, what can I do? And even it's the same as, you know, I always talk about like why I help coach all my kids' activities is because I'm just not good at like, here's my kid, you take care of my kid. And like, if I have the ability to help my kid and other kids, I'm going to pitch in and help out. You know, I'm going to ask, what can I do?
Yeah.
How can I make it better?
That's
And
good.
so I think that's how I end up getting involved. And I'm interested in curious. I'm interested in almost everything too. So there's that aspect.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, you know that this show is about helping young professionals to launch their careers. And what advice would you give a young professionals who want to serve the community, but isn't sure where to start? What would you say?
I always recommend, I think the Young Professionals Network through the Chamber of Commerce is a fantastic organization to get involved with because they have committees there or something similar to that. They have committees that you can get involved with. You can kind of learn how committees work. If you are interested in like the board or the higher level committee, you can learn what that looks like. So it's almost like you get experience and practice in helping and serving. Or the other thing is I always just tell people too, I'm like, well, what if you know, because I have some people are like, oh, I want to be on a board. And I'm like, well, great. Well, first of all, what's your superpower? You know, like what can you do? What do you do extremely well? So you need to know that. You have to have good self-awareness. And then what are you passionate about? Like, what are you interested in? You know, like for me, Fargo Theater, like I love films. I always have. I help with the film festival. I love concerts, music, you know, it's performing arts. So that's a passion of mine, you know, and the other organizations that I'm involved with, you know, pretty much, I feel like almost any organization that would come to me and tell me what they're doing, I'd probably be like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. How can I help? You know, and that was the beauty of like my time at United Way too, is I got to see all the different organizations, and not all, but a lot of the organizations in the community doing amazing work. And so I think you have to figure out, you know, who you are, what you're interested in, and then you know, what are you passionate about? And honestly, like, I'm like, reach out to that organization. If you're like, hey, I like animals, you know, find a shelter or something and say, hey, I'm interested in helping. How can I help? And more than likely they're going to say, you know, hey, you know, we could use someone to answer phones or to whatever the task may be. So all of a sudden you get engaged with that organization, you start developing a relationship. They get to see who you are. They see how you work. You know, are you doing what you said you were going to do? And are you delivering, and are you contributing? And if you are, and you continue to contribute, then they're going to try to give you more responsibility. Which eventually, if there's an organization that has a board, you know, then or a governing board, there's working boards and governing boards. So they're two different things, but you know, it's,
and if you contribute to the organization, if there is an opportunity, they will always think of you.
They should. If you're an organization that's creating your board, you should look, you know, they'll look at different skill sets that they maybe want to have on that board, but they'll also look, you know, if there's a relationship established already, I mean, I always just say, it's like, you got to get your foot in the door somehow, some way, and just start creating that opportunity for yourself.
So I don't know how long we have before another break, but, you know, very quickly, what kind of legacy do you hope to live in Fargo and beyond?
Oh my goodness, legacy. I guess I don't really think about legacy so much, but I think for me, my ultimate life goal is I want to feel like I made some sort of dent. Like I have a finite amount of time on this planet and to be alive, and I don't want to spend it sitting on the sidelines and watching. I want to be involved. I want to be in the arena. And at the end of my life, on my proverbial deathbed, I want to look back and say, I contributed, I did everything. I took the skills I had and I absolutely maximized them to serve at the highest possible level that I could, and gave the most and did something, made an impact, made a dent. Like I was here, and I didn't just take, I gave, you know, I gave. And so I guess if you think about, that's the legacy I want to leave is there's a person that didn't leave anything on the field, gave it my all.
Wonderful. You know, like, man, you know, I know the first time we met and I said, you know, I have to have you on the show because this is exactly why not only your professional journey is really inspiring, and young people can learn a lot from that, but also the kind that you are, that willing to help, willing to support others. And that's something that is priceless. And I really appreciate you being on Professional Lunch today. And so now we're going to take another short break. And then when we come back, we will talk about young professionals, advice for young professionals, and also what we have going on. We have Aaron here today. Aaron is a commercial real estate and a good friend of Professional Lounge. This is we made it quite a few times now, and as I did earlier, putting him on the spot to sign up as a mentor on our platform.
I'm doing it right now on air.
So to sign up as a mentor on our platform, and that fits right into the questions that we are asking. We're about to ask him right now. Looking ahead, Aaron, how do you see yourself continuing to invest in others, whether with through public service coaching or informal or formal mentorship?
So, I mean, all of the above. I mean, yeah, I'm going to sign up. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to make sure I do sign up for Professional Launch. So okay. I plan to do that. And we'll see, I've got some sort of thoughts and ideas on other public service opportunities that I'm exploring. So not quite ready to talk about anything publicly or on air yet.
That's fine.
But I'm kind of, I have some thoughts and ideas of where that could take me. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of start broadening my real estate out to other communities in North Dakota. I'm more interested in North Dakota specifically. And so hopefully just making more connections in those communities. And so if there's other individuals that I sort of encounter, always happy to help there. And a lot of it is, I think now I'm at the point where I end up getting more kind of inbound, people asking if I can help or would be interested. So I think, just through continued public office and nonprofits and different groups that I get involved with, I think I don't see it slowing down. Let's put it that way. And coaching, I'll probably max out at some point on coaching as my kids get into, my oldest is in junior high now. So, I think at that level, I'll probably have to step away and let the professionals handle it. But with my younger kids, I think I'll do it as long as I can until I hand them off to the professionals.
Wonderful. Funny you mention your kids, because I was just about to ask you, if your kids were to follow in your footsteps someday, what would you hope they learn from the way you have lived and led others?
Oh, don't ever start a brewery would be the thing I would make sure. I guess if they want to. I think about that a lot. I think about it depending on what my kids do, where they go. I think having someone, I just want to make sure that I don't feel like I'm dictating or controlling what they do, but trying to be there for them as a resource and, to have questions or to support them. And, I think one of the podcasts I was listening to is this dad was talking about his son running for student body president in school. And he was like, well, of course I hope my son wins, but like there's a part of me that kind of hopes he loses too, because you learn a lot by losing. And so for me, the brewery obviously closing down in November, and I still call it a business failure. I know people will argue and say, no, it was a success. And I'm like, yep, I understand.
It was a learning opportunity.
But that's exactly what I think. I hope my kids see what I do, and that I'm not afraid to fail, or I'm not afraid to put myself out there and take risk, and knowing that what's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't work out, and yes, there's money at stake and different things like that, but money comes and goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is the final couple of minutes of the show. Usually we have that this time to ask professionals who come on, what advice do they have for young professionals who are in college trying to figure out what they want to do with their life? So we have about 1 minute.
Yep. I would just say, just keep in mind, you don't have to figure out what you're going to do for your whole life or what your career is going to look like. You don't have to define that yet. Mm-hmm. You just have to figure out what your first step is going to be. What's the first thing that you're going to do when you're finished with school? And the sooner you can kind of start reaching out to people, and start asking to have coffee, sign up to be a mentee, those type of things, take some action, start thinking about it, start working on it, and give yourself some grace. Just understand that you don't have the experience yet. You'll get there. And this is how you get the experience. You have to get into things and learn. And even if you get the job you want and you hate it, that's actually a good thing, because you learned, well, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But you take what you learn, and then, well, what do you think you're going to do next? And then you just keep learning, you keep growing, and don't allow yourself to get stuck in something that you don't feel like is the right fit for you. You know, keep pushing.
Wonderful. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on Professional Lunch today. We appreciate, again, your story, and thank you for sharing it with us. And now, one thing we always say on the podcast is we want to we have a way of wishing everybody a great day, because it's up to you. So what I usually say is, it's up to you to make today a great day. So have a great day.